This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, folks, welcome. My name is Paul Connor. I'm the Planning and Zoning Director. Thank you for coming here tonight. Joe Segali is with us. He's our consultant for the project and will be facilitating tonight. But I wanted to kick off by, did we preview to you, Chris, to give us a little welcome from the Affordable Housing Committee?
No, but I can wait.
Oh, okay. Please wing it. It's a welcome because this is being hosted by the city's Affordable Housing Committee.
That's fantastic. Well, this is tremendous turnout. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking out about housing and shelter here in South Burlington. The comp plan process, as it goes through the refresh, the most important voice is the resident's voice. So this is fantastic feedback to do that in person and welcome online. Your Affordable Housing Committee members is made up of volunteers. We serve on staggered terms. If you're on the committee, do you mind just raising your hand? So we're here to listen to you. We're really here just to hear your feedback. If there's an opportunity where we can clarify something, or if you have a question, we'd be happy to jump in. But really, we're going to have Paul. Really is going to run the meeting, and thank you.
We'll do it together.
Oh yeah.
Teamwork here. So thank you so much. This is a very important topic to each of us, and let's get this started. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris. Can we just start, because we've got a good grouping of people here tonight. Could we do just a quick introductions? Just say, let's say your name, and if you live in the city, what part of the city you live in, and if you don't live in the city, what your interest of being here is. So, Chris, do you want to start? Because you've
Chris Trumbull, I live off of Heinsberg Road. Thank you.
Cindy Dooley, I live on East Terrace on Williston Road.
Peter Plumeau, SEQ.
Leslie Blackmo, I live with Peter down the street from Chris.
Ariel Jensen Vargas, I live in South Village.
Vince Bolduc, Southeast Quadrant as well.
Jesse Baker, I serve as your city manager.
Tim Barrett, City Council. I live in the Cider Mill. My first apartment was in Burlington on Converse Court for $245 a month, including heat.
1981.
John Bosange, Golf Course Road, Southeast Quadrant. Larry Kupferman, Queen City Park, the south side of South Burlington.
Carolyn Peters, Old Schoolhouse Road in SEQ.
Megan Emery, Chamberlain neighborhood on Myers Court.
Donna Belladance for Parkway off of Shelburne Road.
Ray Beecher, resident of CHT Garden Street apartment right next door.
Gwen Donovan, a resident of CHT on Market Street.
And I'm Lydia Diamond. Talk about putting people on the spot. I live on Lime County Road.
Sally Bowen, I live in Allard Square next door.
Same here, Cecile Vian, next door, Allard Square.
Cindy Reed, Prouty Parkway. I'm also with Cathedral Square.
Julian Mandigo. I don't live in South Burlington, but I also work with Cathedral Square as an associate community developer.
I guess. Yes.
Nora Senecal, I live in the Orchards neighborhood. I wasn't sure what else I was supposed to say besides my name, right? Here, I live in South Burlington.
Dan Albrecht on Proctor Avenue over by Rice High School.
Andrew Challenger, WSEQ.
Mike Simino, Dorset Park.
Linda Bailey, I live in Chamberlain.
Tom Bailey. I live in Chamberlain off Patchen Road. And my first apartment was $135 on King Street.
But yeah, what's it back at 69 or 70? Something like that.
And for those who are online, start, John, I see you're in the middle square on our diamond there, so.
Sure. John Burton, I'm on Harbor Ridge Road in the southwest area.
And Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Dopp on Cheese Factory Road.
All right, Emily, if you can hear us.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Holt Gosselin. I live off of Patchen Road.
All right, Corey, are you there?
Hello, yes, hi. Corey McDonald with the other paper.
Great. Amanda.
Hi, Amanda Hannaford, and I live in South Burlington in the southeast quadrant, and I apologize for having my camera off. It's not working today.
No problem. Amy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I live in Queen City Park and I also work at the Champlain Housing Trust.
All right, Frank.
Frank Von Turkovich, Swift Street.
All right, and we've had two folks who just walked in, so really put them on the spot. To say your name and where you live or how you're affiliated with South Burlington.
Sure. Evan Langfeld. I am the CEO of O'Brien Brothers. So I do not live in South Burlington, but I do run a company here. Provider.
I'm Dawn Philibert and I do live in South Burlington.
And I'm Alan Lozado from the Southeast Quadrant.
Great, I was going to get you last, Alan. Thank you for speaking up.
There's one here. Sorry to out you like this.
Ryan Doyle, I live on Woodside Drive.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I'll do one more who popped up, and then anybody else who comes in, you'll have to guess who we all are. Ashley.
Hi there. I missed what I'm doing. I imagine I'm just introducing myself. I'm Ashley Adams.
Where do you live?
Okay. So I own a business in South Burlington on Airport Parkway, and I own 14 rental properties in South Burlington as well.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming. This is a great turnout, and I was really excited to hear that we pretty much have the entire geography of the city represented here, which is really exciting. And so I thank all of you for coming tonight. I'm going to start with I promise, very short little presentation on sort of what we know about the city, the plan, what we're at, and then I will quickly move into the part where you're all doing the talking. So just 1 second here.
Oh boy.
Presentation. It's where they move this every single time.
Slideshow at the top.
Yeah, it's in the middle.
There we go. All right, so we're all here because we are updating the city's comprehensive plan. We're calling it City Plan 2024. It is the city's overarching policy statement. This is the big guiding document about where we're going over the next decade, and it will help shape the work that our elected and our volunteer groups, volunteer policy committees work on. It will help shape our land development regulations. It'll help shape the types of grant applications we go for, and more budgets that we put together each year. It sets a shared vision, guides the council and administration, guides regulations and capital investments. There are a whole number of required elements under state statute that need to be either included or addressed specifically. The current plan expires in February 2024, so we are here to undertake the update. We're in the big heart of the public input right now. This is our 10th of 11 sessions on community conversations. If you are not busy tomorrow night, please come back to talk specifically about the Southwest neighborhood. We've been mixing these between topic-based meetings and geography-based meetings. Obviously, there's overlap, but that's what planning does. A few things that we wanted to sort of go through from a data, what's going on in our community. We've seen in the last, in the last decade, a little bit more than that, 1.28% population growth annually, which is high for Vermont, but low for many parts of the country. It falls squarely in what we were projecting would take place over this same period in our 2016 plan. Housing growth is a little bit higher than population growth, not a surprise to us. This is a trend that's happening all around the country where we're continuing to see a decline, though not as substantially as it was in the past, in number of people living in a household. So, one of the things that when we talked with the city and schools demographer, that there can be things that affect population go in a lot of different directions. So a family that had, say, 3 kids that all moved out of the house, the parents may still live in that house for the next 20 years, but there's 3 fewer residents in that house. Those 3 people may be living in 3 separate apartments. And so that could be now 4 dwelling units that occupy the same number as one family did previously. And that's some of, generational and sort of national demographic trends. We see about 143 homes added per year. When I use the word home, I mean in any form. So it could be an apartment in an apartment building, it could be an accessory dwelling unit, it could be a single family home. Home is a home in terms of the numbers, and we will talk in a minute about what that breaks down to. We are in the process, and I'll talk about this more in a minute. We're about to hit a pretty substantial milestone in terms of the character and shape of our community. We're about to be a community where the majority of housing is not single family housing, and we'll talk about that more in a second. Our demographics are changing. Our population is becoming more diverse. There are over 10% of our residents speak a language other than English at home. Over 10% of our residents are foreign born. 24% of households include somebody who has a disability and all the different types of disabilities. That's a substantial number. Interestingly, our median age is actually declining slightly, and that probably has to do with there's a lot of housing that's been added in recent years that might be catering towards people who are in a little bit of a younger demographic. So we'll see where that goes over time. A lot of effort has been put in the last 20 years or so to target where development takes place in the city. We have been seeing some of that really taking place, where the 2 charts at the bottom show where housing has been in terms of our major land use categories, red being our high density areas, yellow being our medium density, low density areas, and orange being our more sort of Kennedy Drive medium density areas. Historically, almost 60% of all of our housing is in the low density areas, but if we look at what's been built in the last 10 years, the majority is either in the high or medium density areas. Also, in terms of new housing that's been approved through development review, about 85% of it since 2010 has been within or immediately next to the city's transit overlay district. That doesn't necessarily mean every new house that's been built. It's about new projects that have begun through the development review process. Some knowns, 60% of our households are ownership, 40% are rentals. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're in the midst of a big transition in terms of the types of housing. So 23 years ago, I guess, 2/3 of all the homes in South Burlington were single family homes. Now, as of 2023, 50% are single family homes. And that reflects in 20 years a pretty substantial change. What that means is year over year, the overwhelming majority of the housing that's getting built in South Burlington is multifamily housing. And as we think about what that represents in terms of community services, in terms of what the needs of our population are for recreation, or how they get to run errands or get to work or raise their families or however they choose, that it's a big change. It's a big transition. It's going to be a theme in this plan. 34% of our households have a cost burden where they're paying over 30% of their household income towards housing, or they live in substandard housing. Over one-eighth of our total households are paying more than 50% of their income towards housing. Median gross rent, which is just a blanket number across all types of rentals, is almost $1,600 per apartment. A few things that we know going into this work that the City Council and the Planning Commission have already agreed on, which is that This 2024 plan is an update to the 2016 plan. The 2016 plan was a major overhaul of all the sections. A lot of that policy direction is the council and planning commission felt that it's generally on the right track, and this is refinements and updates. The city council last year in October adopted our first ever climate action plan. The plan's ambitious targets, and they are ambitious, are going to be incorporated into the 2024 comprehensive plan. The city's going to strive to have an enhanced energy plan. And there's been all sorts of studies that have been done in the last 8 years. And for those who are in attendance tonight or those who are not, if you put effort into those are the work of that is being incorporated in here. There are four major themes, four major vision goals that are in our comprehensive plan in the draft. There's a lot more text to it, but basically the whole plan has behind it these four concepts of being human focused, opportunity oriented, climate resilient, and inclusive, fair, and just. So when we get to Joe's part here in a minute, the objective is to hold co-equal all four of these as we think about all the aspects of our community, whether we're talking about housing or transportation or economic development or natural resources or agriculture or recreation. How do we hold these four values and strive to achieve all of them through all of our work? And this is something that is not just it doesn't just live in the plan. This is the way that as the city council puts together their annual work plans, they're looking to these same four, or the current version of these same four vision statements. So thinking really strongly about this and challenging ourselves to how do we achieve, in this case, our housing goals, complementary and implementing all of these. All right, that's what I got. Thank you for your giving me a few minutes there.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Segali. I'm your facilitator for the night. And quickly about me, I retired from the Agency of Transportation in June. I was the Director of Policy Planning and Research and been in planning for about 30 years, working here in Chittenden County and other places. And I live in Huntington. I see a couple Huntingtonians from the past here, so it's great to see you. And currently the chair of my own planning commission. I was on the select board too for a while. So these are the regular ground rules. Treat each other with kindness and keep the discussion focused up here. We're going to ask, raise your hand when you want to speak. For those of you that are online, what we'd like you to do is turn on your camera when you want to speak. I think it works for most of you, and that'll just be a visual cue for me, and Paul will help as well that you want to speak, because to manage both these things going on here. And again, just kind of keep the discussion focused here. It's great to see so many people here. Housing has kind of come up in the other meetings throughout, and this is our 10th meeting, so it's definitely a hot topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little online polling just to kind of get everybody warmed up. It'll take about 5 to 10 minutes to do this. So what you need to do is pull out your phone if you have it here. And if you don't, that's fine. This isn't an official survey or anything, but it's just to kind of get people warmed up. And at home, you can go to the same place on your computer or use your phone. So just type in your browser menti.com. So that's MENTI.com. Is everybody seeing that so far? And you'll end up seeing the screen pop up on the right here. So it's Menti, MENTI.com. And then when you get there, enter code 19490744. Can you switch over to Menti?
Just give people a chance to read the number there.
Yep. I'll keep reading
Are
it.
you sure that's the right number?
Yep.
Okay.
You don't need the dash.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you don't need
Oh, no,
it. 19490744.
All right, I'm going to switch screens here. If you didn't get it, it'll show up again in just a second.
And there is a method to this madness. This will lead us into our open discussion, but it gets people kind of oriented a little bit. So,
1949 and then.
it's 19490744.
I'm sorry, what's that again?
It's up at the top of the screen.
Yeah, it's on top of the screen and it's, that's okay. I know this is a little. So hopefully you should all be seeing this. This is the first question. It's a little fun question. See how everybody's feeling tonight. What one word best describes your mood at this moment? Actually, I think you can put in up to 3 words. And there'll be curious, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Anxious because it's hard to find housing.
The first one, that's why. That word sounds good.
Engaged, that's great. Interested, I would hope so. Hopefully no one's enraged, you know, one letter can make a pretty big difference. I'm not sure how many people we have here, probably about 30, I'm guessing, altogether. You can kind of see the people answering on the bottom corner. Curious and interested are kind of rising to the top. Happy, that's great. There's no reason to be nervous. I'm a little nervous, but you guys don't need to be nervous.
You should be.
Okay, we're gonna move on. So what activities do you do in South Burlington? Just answer all that apply. And I know some of you have already, many of you have been to the previous meetings and have answered this already, so you're pros at this. Some of the questions are a little bit different coming up. One of the slides that Paul shows, I can't remember if you showed it tonight, was just the difference in the number of people that live and work in South Burlington. I mean, there's a lot of people that come in. Very, small percentage of people both live and work in South Burlington. And that's usually been reflective in these little polls that we're doing. But it's no surprising you all do sorts of things in South Burlington. I usually ask, what other? Anybody want to kind of share what they do that falls in the other category? Yes.
I didn't think that exercise was necessarily recreation. So, I mean, there's a gym.
Depends how you feel about it, yeah.
Yeah, you do it right.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, go ahead.
I live in South Burlington. I don't have transportation, so I literally live in South Burlington. So that other category covers whatever I can't think of at this moment.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead.
Volunteer.
Yeah, that's come up a bunch of times. And that's a Vermont thing for sure. Okay, thanks everybody. We're gonna keep moving on here. All right, this is one of the questions that the Housing Committee had posed, and I thought this would be a good way to kind of get at it. But do you know someone who is having trouble finding housing that they can afford? I think almost everybody's answered. I mean, I think this is not surprising. It just underscores the problem. And it seems it doesn't matter where you are, and just this is a common challenge that we have in Vermont, and obviously the legislature is dealing with it. Everybody's kind of dealing with this and trying to figure out how we can move forward, and that's why partially why we're here tonight, and how in the role that the comprehensive plan can help do that. Okay, so this is just an open-ended question, so you can put in anything you want. A short sentence kind of works best, or a phrase or something. In what way should the comprehensive plan address the need for affordable housing? And this helps too, because not everybody feels comfortable maybe speaking, and so feel free to throw in your ideas. And I'm sure if also feel free to send any comments later on to Paul if you don't feel like you really had a great chance here to speak. Protect tenant rights, make zoning more inclusive, encourage infill, it's all great stuff. Make it easier to develop, which might help with costs. Open more land to building homes. This is like part of the challenge of planning exercises, when the environmental group met, they might sort of push back on that one a little bit. Support more great neighborhoods like the Orchards. Pay attention to the property tax rate so that all costs of attendant services to housing. Is anything there, Paul, that kind of jumps out at you?
Yep, sorry.
Well, they're all great.
I'll get a trophy. Yeah. just going to put this in the record. I don't want to have to read through all this, but thanks for everybody taking the time to do this. Those are some great comments.
That'll be recorded.
Yes, yeah. So I want to go over the vision and goals again, just a little bit deeper. And the next question is going to ask you to rank these as it relates to housing, and then that will set the agenda for us as we start talking about the comprehensive plan. How can housing support these goals? And we'll start with kind of the most relevant one, I'll say, and take it from there. So inclusive, fair, and just. It's about creating opportunities for all residents and all visitors, in this case, I guess, for housing, right? Human focus is investing in a high quality, human scale built environment. That's important when you think about neighborhoods and housing. Climate resilient is about emphasizing sustainability for long-term viability of a clean and green city. And then opportunity oriented is about being a supportive and engaged member of the regional and statewide community. So it should be pretty intuitive how you rank these. Just go in and start filling out the spaces, and it will go from there. So again, when you're thinking about housing, what's the relationship? Got a few more to go here. I can see where we're going to start. Okay. Anybody else need a minute to answer? Great. So we're going to start out with inclusive, fair, and just, human focused, climate resilient, and opportunity oriented. I'll just ask a question. Does this seem about right to everybody? Do people feel comfortable kind of taking this basic approach? Okay. So let's, Paul, if you don't mind switching back to the Zoom screen so we can see everybody.
Hang on. Almost ended the whole meeting there.
Thanks everybody for coming. Okay, so now I'm gonna try to get you all to kind of share, and we'll have an open discussion here. We're starting with inclusive, fair, and just. And the housing committee, in some way, they're made my job kind of easy because they added a couple questions. So their question is how would you suggest improving the availability of affordable housing in your neighborhood or South Burlington? So how to provide more affordable housing. And my question is how would you do that in an inclusive, fair, and just way? What are the challenges to doing that in a way that's fair and just and inclusive? Anybody want to take the initial stab to get the ball rolling? And I after my 10th one, it usually only takes one person to talk, and things kind of go from there.
Sure, I'll jump in.
Yes, Cindy.
I'll pick sort of an easy one, which is resources. And it's increasingly costly to build affordable housing. So I think the city should incent permanently affordable housing. And the Housing Trust Fund is phenomenal. I think we need to grow it. It's a great starter, but I think we really need to increase the funding for that. And I think we also need to lower impact fees for permanently affordable housing.
Okay, great.
Those are just two really easy,
so
not easy, but.
That fund is money that's available to help with affordable housing?
Yeah, it's really it's for small gap money.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we need to increase it.
Great. I saw some other hands up. Okay, go ahead, Ryan, right?
Yes, Ryan, thank you. Our system for building is intuitively for profit. There aren't a lot of alternatives to that. We don't really have cooperative housing here in Vermont to any large degree, except for a few smaller homes in Burlington that house like 6 to 8 people. But cities like Vancouver and Vienna have that on a very large scale. And looking at making the kind of legislative gains in the city to make those regulations very clear, and then attach that to something like the housing fund so that those are viable options for groups of people to create, so that the cost of those units doesn't go up at the same rate as everything else that gets built.
Okay, great, thanks. Ashley, would you like to say something?
Yeah, something that strikes me when I hear inclusive, fair and just, I really appreciate the sentiment, and I appreciate that that sentiment is given, is prioritized. I just don't see that in action currently. It is not inclusive, fair, and just where my tenants live, nor is it where I work. We are exposed to the deafening F-35. I actually hear it right now here in Burlington, and I know it's much, much louder for my tenants right now as I speak. They certainly don't feel comfortable having their children play outdoors while the F-35 is overhead. I don't sit at my picnic table at work, nor do my employees because of the F-35. I don't go out to my car. I don't want to be in the parking lot while the F-35s are overhead. Meetings are continually interrupted. Phone calls are continually interrupted. But that's the least of my concerns. I don't live there. My tenants do. They are disproportionately BIPOC, disproportionately new Americans. They are working class and poor. And this is what they have to live with. And that is not fair. And that is not just. And I've attended meetings in South Burlington before, and South Burlington officials have tried to shut down comments about the F-35. They don't want to hear it. And I'm telling you, I hear it every day. And so do my tenants, and we've had it. So I really think that the sentiment is wonderful. But what I need to see and what they need to see is something enshrined in this comprehensive plan. This is a wonderful opportunity for the city to enshrine values that protect actions, values behind them, and actual actions going forward that protect folks from both further harm and that remediate that harm by eliminating the F-35, by seeking every possible way to eliminate the F-35, to restore housing on those 44 acres, and to do nothing, and I mean nothing, to inflict further harm on these residents, whatever that means. I think one thing that means is not allowing the airport, which I think is a scourge upon this community, to further encroach upon the Chamberlain neighborhood as they tried to do when they attempted to have the city rezone last year. And it was quite the battle to prevent that from happening. So I have more to say. I understand other people do too. I don't want to dominate the conversation, but when I see fair and just, and I think about the noise, and I think about the air pollution that these people are exposed to, and they are there because that's what they can afford. And that's wrong. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ashley. Amy, and then I'll come back into the room.
I think really taking a look at the zoning ordinance to streamline it, to really encourage infill and adaptive reuse and make that permit process as quick and easy as possible, because I think everyone's in favor of especially that kind of development. And then I know a lot of people have read the book, The Color of Law, and to take those lessons learned from that book to really think about our ordinance and make sure that we are not inadvertently creating exclusive neighborhoods. There's been a lot of talk about needing to build affordable housing, multifamily housing along transportation corridors, and that's true. But we need to make sure too that areas where there is more conserved land are not exclusively for higher income people. So just really looking at our zoning ordinance through the lens of that book in particular that had so many great historic lessons that we need to take to heart.
Thanks, Amy. That actually came up the other night as well, in one of our other meetings. Peter?
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Amy just said. When I think about fair and just and equitable treatment of all our residents, here in South, you know, in the entire state and the country, but in South Burlington, obviously, tonight, I think about, you know, our zoning ordinances and our existing plans and conserved lands and so forth, and how we got there, and what the, you know, unintended impacts or consequences of those may be from an equity and fairness perspective. We've basically, because of the way that we have zoned our land in this city, in my opinion, we have essentially redlined lower income, less, you know, less well endowed financially people to live only in certain parts of the city where it's marginally affordable, let alone being, you know, not even close to being affordable. And through those zoning and other planning actions, we've made a big chunk of the city completely unaffordable to anyone who wants to live there if they're not very well heeled. And I find that very disturbing.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, in the back, Malcolm.
My name is Ray. I want to introduce myself. I'm a resident here. I live right next door, and I'm the people you were talking about. I'm the low income person. I'm the transgender. I'm the single parent. I am the one living on disability. And I want to remind you, most of you probably already know, $914 is what the federal allowance for the max SSI check is. If I were to lose my housing with CHT, I would have nowhere to go. Nowhere. I'd have to literally move out of country because I am not afforded enough money to be able to have a choice of where I can live, where I can raise my daughter. Right now, I'm raising my daughter on a 4-story apartment complex with no backyard. And right now, we're fixing to lose our playground because we have no autonomy in our own apartment complex. We have no option on where we can live and who we can live with and what our surroundings are. And I'm sorry if I sound very passionate right now. This is so close to home. Because I'll tell you, if I had a choice, I wouldn't be living downtown in the middle of, in the middle of downtown. I'd be out in, somewhere in the middle of the woods where I can, raise my daughter off the land, not off of, what's being packaged at the grocery stores and whatnot. And here, I moved into the building next door as soon as they opened their doors. So I've been seeing all these buildings coming up, and I'm seeing the problems that are starting to develop with this is the fact that our children aren't being put into anybody's mind while these buildings are coming up. As I said, we're fixing to lose our playground. It's a punishment from our manager because the kids can't behave themselves, apparently. But when you have nowhere to play, when you only have hallways, when you only have stairwells, where else are the children going to go to play? With all of these construction things coming up, we're getting many lease violations with many families because the children are playing amongst the construction areas because there isn't anything accessible. The kids can't go after school to the school because they have a program called Schools Out. And they have to be able to decipher who's in that program and who's not when the kids are out on the playground. So they can't go over there all the time. The closest playground is on the other side of a creek that the kids have to walk all the way down, come back around down another road to get to. The Goose Park, all it has is art structures up right now. So what I would really like to see is more thought put into who we are putting into these buildings is more than just adults. There are children here too.
Right, thank you. And again, in other meetings, what's come up is as South Burlington becomes more dense and just the need for more green space integrated, public green space that's integrated so that's accessible for the folks that live here. And so thanks for sharing that. That's really helpful. Yes.
I also am a tenant, and I'm on the flip side of things. I'm a senior citizen, and I worked 50 years of my life, and I cannot afford to live in Vermont where my grandmother was born. And I am dealing with the children running up and down the stairs, slamming my doors. Actually, they harass me. Not your child, but quite a few do. And they run around the building like a gang. And they spit in my face, cough in my face, and call me a COVID freak. They have made my life an absolute hell because they have no outlet. When I first moved here, I taught fitness For 38 years of my life, I had my own business. I was also a journalist, an award-winning journalist, and I can't afford a rental in Vermont. I lived in a 12-man tent as a senior citizen because I had to spend $800 of my $800 Social Security check on the dirt at the campsite. So I had to work in a motor inn to earn food money. And then the cops took my car because it didn't meet the standards. And then they took my cat because she couldn't live in the campsite. I worked for 50 years and I'm living in hell. And it's because these kids have no outlet. They don't do their homework. They run wild through the building. They're tearing it apart. They took a gorgeous building that Snyder Brodman built and they destroyed it.
Okay.
Now, I'm not done.
Okay.
Now, the deal is I have to move and I have nowhere to go. The waiting list is 3 to 5 years. I've already been homeless. I'm not looking forward to being homeless in Vermont again. And then when some people try to help me, those were considered gifts. You know, senior citizens are really mistreated in this town. And I don't even feel like a senior citizen. I'm a cyclist without a car. I am your climate change dream. I cycle to the grocery store. I cycled to the doctor. I cycled to the physical therapist. I cycled so much that I lost muscle, including the muscle of my heart. So, you know, I just want to let you know that senior citizens need to be treated with some respect. And the children need fitness outlets. Now, when I first moved here, I took my artwork, my supplies, and all my yoga mats, and I took my fitness balls, and I figured out each kid's name, and I wrote them on the balls, and I delivered them to their families and said, this is something we can do together. And they told me, no, they can't do that. So they took the balls and destroyed them. I spent $300. So, you know, I'm trying to make a difference. And what do? I get completely harassed, tormented. They stole my bike off the elevator. They tampered with my bike. They call me all kinds of names when I try to come in and out of the building. And I even destroyed my bicep in the process of lifting my bike to get it over 5 steps because they commandeered the ramp. This is a very dangerous place to live as a senior citizen in this building. The children need something. They need guidance. They need to be doing homework at night. They need fitness. They need a playground, but not one where they launch gangs that torment senior citizens. Okay, I'm done for the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for reinforcing the point of the previous speaker. And it's important for us to hear your experience. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm so sorry for you. My name is Lydia Diamond, and I'm a resident. I live on Lime Kiln Road. I recently ran for South Burlington City Council, and I got 14% of the vote. Yay! But I want you to know that when you start talking about what the community is going to build here and build there, if we don't get some help with those damn F-35s, they're not helping us, they're hurting us. And I'm sick of them. I'm sick of them for every child in the Chamberlain neighborhood because they've been traumatized. I'm sick of them because those damn planes traumatized my grandchildren. And we was just trying to take a walk and get some air. I'm tired of not hearing enough accountability from the city of South Burlington regarding these damn F-35s. What, we gotta wait for somebody to do a special study and let the whole world, we all kept getting cancer from the noise. Is there such a thing? I'm sick of F-35. And there are a lot of people who live on my street who are also sick of them. Across the street is all elders. And I agree that elders should be treated better. The disabled should be treated better. Our children should be treated much better because our children are the future. And what the hell you doing to them in this community is criminal as far as I'm concerned. Enough is enough.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Darren Albrecht. So second some of Peter Blomo's points about the zoning. I know the rewrite was done a year or two ago, and natural resource protections were expanded, and I get it and all. But really disappointed at the low density. It's a form of exclusionary zoning, and if we're trying to fight climate change, then density it's good in my neighborhood in the R4 district, and it's good for everywhere else. Because otherwise, these people are commuting from all hell all over, coming from Plattsburgh or wherever, or Addison County, Franklin County, all Washington County. And so, my main point on that was just once you've identified the areas that are okay to build in, i.e. not next to the extreme and not in the wetlands, then increase the density. Humans are not a plague upon the landscape. And we're not, you can just do it by lot coverage if you're worried about stormwater, but our stormwater standards are much higher now than they were 30, 40 years ago. Also, in terms of fairness and justice, it says if we've got a lot of renters, and I think about this lot from my neighborhood, the Shelburne Road corridor, which is targeted for all the density, then city services need to mirror that population and investment. I'm happy to see the apartment buildings along there. That's good stuff. Hopefully we'll get a little more nightlife there. But if the city doesn't invest the resources where the people are in terms of transit, in terms of parks and programming, in terms of a city center, right? We've got, this is great to hear, but the established neighborhoods on Shelburne Road and to some extent Williston Road are ignored, and yet we're the ones that have the density, being asked to take all the density. But the bus service is still crap. The city made no movement on the Hannaford's building, and now it's a Tesla dealership instead of, could have been a community center there, right where all the grocery stores, and the density is in a low income place just down the corner from Lowe's as well too. So justice is about serving the majority of the people here in this town. So it's about serving the people that live in the dense neighborhood, the areas that are zoned for the growth, and that are fighting climate change now through the density we currently live in. So.
Thanks, Dan. Before I come back to you, is there anyone else that would like to speak on the question of inclusivity and justice and equity? And yes.
My name is Jimmy Lace, and I'd just like to make a couple of suggestions for those who spoke about the F-35, because this is a housing meeting,
right?
And housing is really affected by that. First of all, there's the 44 acres, as Ashley mentioned, that was taken out of housing, and housing was demolished near the airport. That's 44 football fields of space where we could have, and it's publicly owned, so it can be affordable housing because the land is already owned by the public. It's owned by Burlington. It's owned by the airport. Secondly, there's 3,000 units of affordable housing that are hurt because, as Lydia mentioned, the noise is so intense in that area of 3,000. It's an oval-shaped area, 1/2 mile from the runway on each side, and about 2 miles from the end of the runway. And that 5 by 1 mile area is so intense. Anybody who's been in it when the F-35 outdoors, it's just painful. It's not a place to grow up from 0 years old. So anyway, the city has the authority to do something about it. This is something I discovered just recently. There's a state law that empowers cities, towns, and villages to regulate vehicles of every kind to promote the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience. That's a perfect law. Now, the federal government delegates to the states the authority to conduct training of their own state National Guard. So this is under the state, and the state has delegated to the cities, towns, and villages. So we can do something about it. We actually have the authority to prohibit the training in the Chamberlain neighborhood of the Vermont National Guard with F-35 jets, and we should use that power. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other, I want to kind of move on to the next goal, and we can kind of bounce back and forth, but just I want to make sure we kind of get to talk about all of it. Any last comments, Ryan, on
Yeah, I just
this
want
topic?
to aggregate some tangential points about parks and recreation and playgrounds. And that is when we talk about equity and the distance that residents have to go to access green space, especially if they're being in a high density neighborhood.
Yeah.
The access and amount of that green space and distance to get to it.
Thanks. I mean, I think this sort of falls naturally into the next goal, which is human focused, right? And that's about investing in a high quality human scale built environment. So having housing that's in that sort of environment. But yes, please go ahead.
What I was actually I don't remember this gentleman's
Ryan.
name. Ryan, you were talking about zoning, and I don't have much knowledge on zoning. So it's more of a question comment than it is anything, and maybe something for y'all to chew on for future reference. So I was told that the building that we currently live in is zoned for both commercial and residential. And I'm only bringing this issue up because there's multiple other issues that could be, but I've never experienced myself. One of the issues is like the timing of when the dumpster gets emptied, which is at 5 o'clock in the morning. We have come to City Hall to ask about that, to see if they could find a way, because other avenues were not working, to be able to help, because we have TV victims in our, building. We have other, people who are, reactive to loud noises. And this dumpster gets as loud as a shotgun. And so it's, with it being residential and business, they can come in at that early in the morning. And the question is that really conducive for the people who live there to have it zoned for both sides? Does it have to be that way? Is there better ways we can do this so that we don't have, all of these loud noises going on at, 5:30 in the morning when there are people in schools and families who plan on getting up?
Yeah, it's a challenge when you're mixing different uses like that. And in order to keep it a human scale environment, there are ways to manage that better. Yeah, great point. Any other thoughts about human scale? Yes, please go ahead.
A couple minutes. I think Paul mentioned earlier how the demographics of the city is changing, particularly single family to more densely developed properties. It seems to me, and this came up at another meeting that I attended, that our municipal structure needs to be assessed in a way that helps people understand what it can do in terms of what city government can do and what their owners of their buildings should be doing. And it seems also to me to understand in this particular part is how much more of a municipal budget can we afford so that municipal services can be expanded. And I think that we've had, as far as I can remember, a very lean municipal budget. And I think city leaders have been very proud in maintaining that. And I think there's probably room to expand that, to raise enough money to start providing perhaps services that we are not used to providing.
Like what? Was that your question? Sure, that's a reason.
What should the city provide? Can I answer?
You can ask me and then I'll ask him, but go ahead. That's a good follow-up question.
Well, I don't want to say that we should be like Burlington, but there's an active housing group in city government in Burlington. There's, from where I'm coming from the conservation side, there's a very active arborist group. It seems to me we can expand, we can look at some services that are not being provided and perhaps have more civic engagement, more citizens involved in deciding what those could be. I mean, I have a couple of ideas myself, but I just think that if we're hearing that, and I'm not saying this is throughout the city, but if we're hearing that the city government is not providing certain services, it's probably because we haven't done that in South Burlington. Perhaps it's time to start looking at some.
Right, maybe there's a change happening, transition, right? So I saw you, Lydia, there. Just before I go, has anyone else who hasn't spoke yet want to weigh in? Then, I know Ashley spoke, but go ahead, Lydia, and then Ashley, I'll come back to you.
Well, I wanted to ask, the state has $250 some odd million to build a new prison. Where is it gonna go? Because South Burlington is already the host of a women's prison. And
So is that a housing issue from your perspective, like where that prison might go?
I think it's ridiculous that the state wants to make another prison.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay.
You can spend money to build a new prison, but people are homeless all over the state.
Okay, so that's like a question just to find priorities at the state level and where the money's going.
Well, where does the city of South Burlington stand?
I'm not sure that's an issue for the city, but yes, go ahead.
I've been clear the counselors can speak because we're three here.
Yeah.
So of course.
Don't make decisions.
We don't make decisions. But I think that when we're talking about, children and families, we have to think about safe streets. So
Yeah.
thinking about density and how can we develop in a way that children can go out and ride their bikes or can, run across the street to go find a friend. I know that going to school, even in our existing housing, is a challenge. For instance, to go from Prouty Parkway over across Heinsberg Road to get to the middle school. So we're already having issues with regard to traffic and feelings of insecurity, sending your children out. So I just wanted to put that up there.
Thank you. Yes, I can't remember your name. That'll come up front here.
Right. No, I was going to agree with you because like Market Street here, when it's pickup time after school, it's completely clogged up. They've had to have the police come out here once or twice to help direct traffic because there's no other entries or exits, and there's no lights on here to help anything.
Okay, thanks.
And it gets thick.
Go ahead.
Hi, this was talked about by Paul in his statistics earlier, but I just want to underscore that there are a great number of people who want to live here, who can't live here because they can't find housing. And it's the overall shortage of housing that I think is one of the biggest concerns facing us in the city and in the region and the whole state, but particularly here. People want to be close to our resources, and we just don't have enough housing for them, whether rental or home ownership. Elders want to stay here, and when they give up their homes, single family homes often can't because the waiting lists are so long in the properties that exist. And they're not the only category.
Thanks. I'm gonna go to Ashley, then I'll come back over here. Ashley?
Yeah, I remember the rezoning task force last year voted unanimously against rezoning the 11 acres on Airport Parkway for the airport, which was fabulous and the right thing to do for the community. And the Planning Commission took that to heart. I'm wondering what is happening with the comprehensive plan to ensure that any attempt by the airport to rezone parcels in that 44 acres that are, it's all residential now, doesn't take place, that we don't have to face a fight like that again, that the city really enshrines that priority in the comp plan. Are there efforts to do that?
Well, I think, you're asking the question in a way that would suggest you would like that to be in the new comprehensive plan. So, I mean, this is part of the effort to do that. I don't know if there's anything more specific.
I mean, that's the whole reason we're having these conversations, to hear from community members about what they want to see in the community. So that's the whole point of why we're all here.
Okay, well, I think that's terrific. And I just, I keep hearing about housing and the housing shortage, and it's a crisis. And I think housing is a human right. And here we have all of this space available in this beautiful walkable community in Chamberlain, that at one time, those 44 acres were community. You know, what makes community? And once it's lost, can it be restored? I think it can, and I think it should in this, particularly in this, again, beautiful walkable community, as opposed to destroying ecosystems through sprawl development. You know, here you have already in Chamberlain a lovely school. You can walk to stores. There is a bus line. So just want to really emphasize that really so many values that you're espousing here would be served very well by protecting, preserving, and then reestablishing housing on those 44 acres.
Okay, thank you. Mike and then Peter.
Thank you, Mike Semino. Cindy Reed started the night talking about resources and about our South Burlington Land Trust. And I agree that we should direct more resources to the housing agenda. Open space has had a penny. I know that's been shared recently with Rec and Parks, but open space has had a penny. The paths have had a penny, and I'm not saying that that's the path that you need to go down. But our choices as a city speak volumes for, what our values are. And I'm hearing that the rest of the ARPA resources are more than likely to be directed to fund the establishing or creating of positions that will help the city deal with climate change. And I support us taking action on climate change. This has nothing to do with how I feel about the importance of the climate change agenda. But you have an allocation of resources that is being considered right now. And the housing agenda, in my opinion, is equally worthy. I've served on the Affordable Housing Committee. I'm still a housing advocate. I look at housing, which is shelter, which is healthcare, which is mental health, it's jobs, it's everything. It's the foundation of our community. I look at that pillar and I do look at the environment. And I say we should be attaching equal importance towards those agendas and finding a way to allocate our resources equally towards them. I feel the plan should really be a catalyst for actions and not just words. Talk is cheap. Actions are what we really need to have taken here. And how can we take actions? Well, one way, in my opinion, is for our land use regulations to anticipate the growth that we're going to see in this community. People want to come to this community. They're going to come to this community. They're going to come to other places in Chittenden County, but they are going to come here. They're going to arrive here, and they're going to be diverse at a level that we've never seen in our community. And we need to be prepared to share what we have with those people. We are blessed. A lot of people in this room are blessed, okay? And we have the capacity to do more, and that's what community is all about. We live in a great place, but there's a whole lot more that we can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Peter? I'm gonna wait. Tom, did you have?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go Nora, then Dan, and then I'll go get you in the back.
We're still on human focus, right?
Yes, we are still on human focus.
Just what Mike said just reminded me of this. So around Shelburne Road, there isn't a lot of land. Well, I'll just say this. You know, one of the by reallocating some of those funds or taking those funds
you know, we have to kind of imagine that to build a park or build some parks or some open space in some of these more high density areas, there is, you know, in some of those areas, the land's already commercial or it's already purchased or it belongs to somebody else. We might have to buy that land in order to create some green space for the apartments and for children, you know, and so it's not, I mean, we have to kind of think of, you know, about our resources and where are we going to hold back money to kind of anticipate some of these things.
Thanks. Dan?
Good. So this is comments more about the inclusive, fair, and just, but it's human folks in the sense. But hasn't been mentioned tonight, but we need a charter change. We're 23,000 people right now. By the time a couple more years go by, we're probably going to be up to 25, 26,000, just based upon what's in the pipeline. We're diverse. We're not a unidimensional town, so we need a charter system. It's taxation without representation. We need this for city council. We need it for the planning commission. Those are the main drivers that drive all the policy in the town. And there's a lot of people who aren't represented. Everybody's a homeowner.
We need geographic.
Geographic,
representation.
More proportional to population, not by voting district, just because that's handy for Donna to do and administer, but by population.
Right.
So that if you're truly representing it, and I think would be, it might be a little vigorous debate or whatever and stuff, but I think it's a fundamental part of American democracy is that representation stuff. We're not, that's where the Vermont model of all the at-large stuff doesn't meet reality. And so
when you get this size, I see Sarah. I'm gonna go with, sorry, I can't remember your
Just
name.
a quick correction for Mike. He mentioned the South Burlington Land Trust. He was really talking about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in terms of city allocation, and there is a city allocation currently, $50,000 a fiscal year. That is the trust fund.
Which Larry is the chair of.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Sarah, you're muted.
My sounding now, sorry about that. I just wanted to highlight something I just heard, which I had asked about at a recent meeting a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that the public at large most avidly embraced when we were in the planning phases of City Center, which many of supported the development of City Center. One of the things that most appealed to the public at large was the notion of incorporating a green space, a central common green area in that development.
Hold on, Sarah. We're having some sound difficulties in here. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Okay.
You're there. You need to rewind just a few sentences. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I guess the point I was just making was that back when City Center was being contemplated and we had lots of listening sessions and workshops with the public, one of the most popular ideas was to have a common green space within City Center, a central area, like an old Vermont village would have had, in which kids could play and they could yell all they wanted and they could kick balls and they could do pickup baseball and families could go out and picnic and whatnot. And somewhere along the line, I guess that's been dropped, as I asked that question a couple of weeks ago and was told that that had just kind of disappeared from the plan. And I'm hearing that that is needed. And I don't know now with the various developers building in City Center, whether that can be clawed back, but I wish it could be.
Okay, thanks. We heard you. Any other thoughts about human scale? Yes. Yeah.
So one of the themes many people have articulated is the need to really look at zoning and equity and not just promote high density along the transit areas, but have density throughout the city and create more livable neighborhoods where we're not just creating pockets, which also disperses income mix more equitably. So I think that's a common theme that really needs to be bold-faced in this, in the notes.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
I would like to add on to what Cindy said.
one of our statistics that we should be embarrassed about in South Burlington is that 51% of our land is set aside so people can't build on it for the future, in spite of the fact that we're closest to the jobs, the principal jobs and employers in the state. Also, the area that's most empty of housing also happens to be the highest income area in the state. If the Southeast Quadrant were a separate city or separate town, municipality, it would be the highest income area in the state, more than Stowe, more than Woodstock. So something's wrong here. And this is, so when you talk about the comp plan, just sort of building on what was done before, no, we have to rethink, because the comp plan isn't for the past, what we currently have, it's for the future. It's what we need to do to make a city that's viable going forward. I've on the Economic Development Committee, we talk to employers. What is their principal concerns about the problems they're having with the city? Not housing. They routinely get people that they accept for jobs, and people say, yes, I'm coming, and then they try to buy a house, try to find a place to live, and guess what? They can't, and they turn it down and leave. That and childcare, which is something I spent yesterday on, and the city does nothing with at this point, is another area. I'd much prefer to see, speaking of human focused, that the city, if instead of devoting more and more staff to other projects, to set up something with economic development with a childcare specialist who could actually work towards having a system set up. And it's if we think housing's tough, childcare is really tough. I spent yesterday working on it and collecting information, because we were going to have an economic development committee meeting last night, but it snowed. So, and then of course, so going back, you've got to rethink the zoning in the Southeast Quadrant, because that's where the land is. When you're talking about, devoting money to parks, let's look at the future and see where the housing is going to be. It can't just be the so-called, what was formerly known as the Underwood property, which nothing is really being done with because we don't really devote a whole lot of money to parks in South Burlington. Refocus and start looking at where people can live, and also recognize housing, childcare, all of it is a regional problem. It's not local. It's not a city thing. We can't look at it within the bounds of our own little silo. We have to look at it regionally. We have to look at the people who don't vote here but need to live here, because that's where the future is going to be. It's got to be. The alternative is just try to keep a lid on it, not have anything done going forward, and that leads us to more of what we've got, which is the highest income area in the state, in an area where you can't build any more housing.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, go ahead, then it looks like you had a comment over here.
Yeah, I raised this at the Chamberlain, the Northwest Quadrant meeting, and I'll say it here again, just building off of what Cindy said, is some of our new residents also would like to have gardens, because that is what they culturally have. And so I really think that it's important for us, when we have affordable housing, that we think about including a really good piece of land for them to be able to garden and to grow their own food, or to use unused road space in the Chamberlain neighborhood, and turn those into community gardens, because it really revitalizes, I think, communities.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to second what she had said, because where we're at, we have a lot of trouble having a place to grow food, and with the income and with the cost of food going up, having that space is so important for us to be able to supplement our money in the summertime.
Right. Yeah, Peter.
Joe, this is going to bleed into the other two areas, so
Okay, go ahead.
apologies, but it builds off of what Helen said, what Tom said, what others have said. Something that I haven't heard a lot about, but concerns me greatly, is the economic viability or vitality of Vermont and Chittenden County and South Burlington into the future. South Burlington, as has been said, we have some of the biggest, fastest growing employers in the state. We have Beta, we have OnLogic, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of UVM Medical Center jobs, and those are growing. And these are all the kind of jobs that Vermont has done incredible work attracting to the state. These are these clean and green industries that we want, right? And those kinds of employers, as somebody was pointing out, they need access to qualified employees. And I was at a hearing in Montpelier a couple of weeks ago on S100, the housing bill, where the co-founder of OnLogic articulated multiple examples of people by name, exactly what I think Mike was talking about, where they were hired from out of state and they had to turn down the jobs because they couldn't find a place to live or that they could afford to live. And, you know, these aren't like, you know, behind the counter at Al's. These are high paying professional technical jobs. And if they can't afford to live here, find a house, you know, and so it all comes down to, I think, what Helen has said, it's supply. We've got to get serious about providing adequate housing that drives prices down, because there's a supply and demand problem here, or at least keeps prices reasonable, so that not only people who want to live here, you know, coming from out of state to these employers can, but how about the people that work behind the counters at Al's and so forth, you know? And how does that help climate change if we're not like providing people with housing close to where they work? You know, they're in Vermont, as we know, has basically no transit. So how are they getting to their jobs? They're driving, instead of driving 5 miles, they're driving 30, 40 miles. Right? So, I mean, that's, to me, it's not complicated. We need much more supply. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in the back, and then I'll come up. Oh, wait, just 1 second. I just want to do a quick time check.
Okay.
So it's about it's past 8:15, and we're supposed to end by 8:30, but we're glad to kind of go beyond that. If you have to leave at 8:30, you know, you have childcare or something like that going on, feel free to do that, but we'll see how the conversation's going. But I think, you know, folks have a lot to say, and we don't want to cut anybody off. Just a quick time check. Yes, please. Go.
When we look at the comprehensive plan of any community, especially one with as many brains in it as this one, we really need to start looking at climate change as number one, because we are ignoring that. When I saw the fireflies across the way from me before 303 Market was built, they were absolutely stunning. I heard the frogs at night, and I saw a big, bushy, red-tailed fox living right there the other day when, right before the bulldozers came in and bulldozed all of that habitat. So I know that has to be done in order to build. However, I don't see green anymore. And it's like, you know, we have to look at children, because Pocahontas, the movie Pocahontas, there's a line in here that talks about how high does the sycamore grow? If you cut it down, then you'll never know. You'll never know. So the important thing is, I don't see green anymore. And what about that parking lot by the mall? I don't see that many cars there. Can we just rethink our transportation to the point where people are cycling like I am? I mean, I'm almost 70 and I cycle everywhere. It keeps me in pretty good shape. So what I'm saying is, what if people cycled? What if people walked? Instead of hopping in their car to drive 1,000 feet to the school, hop in their car to drive 1,000 feet to Trader Joe's, what if we tore up that parking lot, turned it into a beautiful green area, and then you don't have cars going there. What you have are golf carts during the summer and the spring. Park over there. If people have to park with electric cars, that's fine. But they could take their electric carts and come to Trader Joe's where no parking would be permitted. You could use that as a beautiful town square with greenery. Tear up that parking lot, no one's using it, and turn it into a beautiful climate producing area, someplace that's conducive to the birds, something that's conducive to greenery and trees. Because every time you cut down a tree, you're committing climate change crimes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for getting us on to climate change, because that is the next goal we need to talk about. Sorry, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about one of the parks, the Wheeler Nature Park, which has been owned by the city for 30 years. And it's under threat right now of encroachment because of a deal that the city made with developers. And all I would ask is that the new plan, the 2024 plan, not make any change from the 2016 plan with regard to the maps or the text that has to do with Wheeler Nature Park until the Act 250 process is over and we know which way that's going to go. Thank you.
I just want to weigh in on the question of, how do you provide more housing and do it in a way that's climate resilient, maybe helps reduce some greenhouse gas emissions? That's Brian.
To stay on that topic, I know a lot of people brought up the need to have dense housing in all parts of the city. But like you said, that's more yield per mile traveled. We don't have the right transit infrastructure. We don't have enough bike ped infrastructure to actually move those people anyway other than car, as opposed to taking an approach in the city plan that says that we will build that bike ped infrastructure, that we will require transit in the very dense areas, and to commit to providing that and then extending it out before we extend more density outward and beyond, so that we aren't committing people to absolutely becoming dependent on cars. Somebody just mentioned that at our meeting last Wednesday with transportation. Similarly, that they moved and then they couldn't bike anywhere. It just takes a long time to get that infrastructure.
It's always a challenge with transportation. You wouldn't build a house if it didn't have sewer, but if it didn't have a sidewalk. It's a challenge. Because you can kind of get away with it. Any other thoughts on housing? Oh, sorry, Aaron.
Evan. We've known each other for a
I
while.
know. I've been watching in the corner of my eye just in case.
So I just want to echo a little bit about what Mike said in terms of the need to prioritize housing. And I think that it's not an either or. I mean, we have to prioritize the climate because we're in a climate crisis, but we also have to prioritize our housing needs because we're also in a housing crisis. And we're never going to make any progress on the climate piece if we're ignoring the human aspect to it, because we're all the ones that are going to make change on the climate side. And the city just made a pretty aggressive move in terms of moving towards renewables on new residential construction. I actually fully agree with that move. The challenge with it is that it's being done at a time when we've already seen incredible cost inflation on the construction side. It's also being layered on at the same time that we're adding significant education impact fees on new construction. So you've got this housing crisis where people already can't afford. You add on this inflation, then you add on these climate initiatives, and then you add on the education impact tax. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in added cost to each new unit that's going up. And so I think we need to start prioritizing what we're trying to do here. And I think it's sort of along the lines of what Mike said. If we want to make actual progress on these initiatives, it's not an either or. We can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we can enable housing that has renewable resources, that's highly energy efficient, that's 100% electric. We can do that, but we have to put resources towards it in order to keep the cost of housing down. So I think, again, it's looking at our resources and prioritizing how we want to allocate them.
Thank you. It's good to hear from somebody that's in the business of building houses. Thanks.
Well, City's definitely in the business too.
Yes, Dan.
We're back to we're on the climate thing now.
Yeah, we're on climate, sorry. Yeah.
So I think some of this is sort of like a tactical thing, but I'll get back to discrete examples of the recent zoning bylaws. Protecting the river corridor, and I do this kind of work I work for the Regional Planning Commission, work on water quality issues, so I get stormwater, fluvial erosion, river corridors, large blocks of woods. That's fine. You've identified the areas not to build. but to limit the density in the areas that are okay to build. It's really was just if you really care about, the biggest driver is vehicle miles traveled, no doubt about it, no ifs, ands, or buts. And it's really weird that we have this restrictive, we're essentially enshrining low density land use. I measured the distance today with a map viewer from Tilly Drive to the Shelburne, South Burlington, just go down Heinsberg. It's 2 miles away, for the love of Christ. And so when I look at that, just that punitive measure and of, no, we're not only limiting the density in the areas in the SEQ that are okay to build on, not river, not wetland, et cetera, and then also taking out of the density calculation, if somebody had a 20-acre lot, but 5 acres were in floodplain, you take that out of the density calculation. That's just punitive.
Right.
So just, you've identified the areas to avoid the natural resources. You can do both at the same time. And it was really just another way to do exclusivity. It's not climate efficient. Don't tell me that's climate efficient at all. Okay. And if you believe that density and services are good in my neighborhood and the other high density, then it's good for your neighborhood too. And I remember, this is an awkward thing. If we were to go back in time, I remember I started grad school in 2001 at UVM, and the guy who built, the original guy who created South Village, presented to my master's class at UVM, and he was all new urbanism, buzzword.
Dave Scheuer.
Okay, and I raised my hand and I said, how come there isn't any commercial zoning in South Village? Because everybody will scream bloody murder, so we're just going for. So, but it's ironic, you've got a great development there with high density trend, and there's not one commercial thing in there. So they come to my neighborhood on Shelburne Road to do their shopping, go to yoga, get a coffee, whatever, all that stuff. That's not climate efficient. So we could do micro targeting and create more little cider mill or that little part over by the Rye development on 116 with little pockets of commercial. Right. It's retrofit.
Yep. Great. Tom, and then
I wanted to take off on something that Dan said about travel cars being the biggest contributor to the climate problem. I was hoping to get something posted on the screen that I was bringing tonight. These are VTrans maps. This shows the jobs, where the jobs are, the density of jobs in Vermont. You probably can't see it that well, but Burlington, South Burlington, right here. This is the commuting map. Look at the red ones. They're the ones that people commute from the most. So if you live in Middlebury, which I did the mileage, 36 miles from here, but in rush hour, that's an hour. So you're committing 2 hours of your day to get to and from work. And you also are burning up, contributing more than anything else. The person that is here goes 3 miles to get to work, and then the person in Middlebury goes 12 times as far. Fletcher, that's up here. That's also a high travel road. So the people that live out in Fletcher are driving down to UVM Medical Center to work, and they do it every day. It's absurd. It's absurd when the alternative is to build more and more housing here. As one of the people that I met with recently, his solution is build it, build it, build it, because that's the only way we're going to start to solve this problem.
I'm going to go online for a minute. Dan, you posted some comments. Did you want to say anything to the group? We know we saw your comments, but you may want to share.
Well, we did. I saw them.
I know.
but
The
you
group,
did not
I
say
meant, yeah, sorry. Me and Paul.
Thank
I
you.
saw
Yeah.
them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah. Just wanted to share that a great way to build more housing in South Burlington is to put resources to getting rid of the F-35s so that you could rebuild the 44 acres that were demolished. That land is ready for building. We could build affordable housing there. And once those menaces are removed, we can build more housing there. And I encourage everybody to pursue that. And so that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Amy?
Yeah, I wasn't able to see that map, but I thought that was a really good point that, and I think it's important that the plan reflect that South Burlington, especially as it comes to climate change, that we're part of a region and that we need to see ourselves, the boundaries of South Burlington mean nothing in terms of the environment and in terms of the climate. We need to have a regional approach to that and make sure that we have housing close to the jobs. And also, I just wanted to say that public transportation follows density. We can't wait for a bus line to build housing. You have to have the housing and the riders before the bus will go there. We're seeing this out in Colchester at Severance Corners. We're building more density out there. We're part of a project with Ireland, and that's going to entice the bus. There'll be enough riders to come out and have a line out there.
Thank you. So it's 8:30 and we have one more goal, and we sort of kind of just dipped into that a little bit. It's the opportunity-oriented, being a supportive and engaged member of the larger regional statewide community, in this case, to address housing. So we can go for another 10 or 15 minutes. If you leave, feel free to leave. No one's gonna think badly of you. But I think it's everybody okay with hanging around just a little while longer?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Yes.
No, thanks. I think that's a good segue into the discussion that some folks have mentioned in terms of regional presence and having an understanding of what other communities are going through.
Yeah.
The only issue I have with Tom's depiction of people coming from Fletcher, do you think those people would actually move to South Burlington, or would it be in addition to?
Actually, I asked that question a lot to people that live out in the sticks. That's a routine question when I talk to somebody who's working here. If you could pay for what you have out there and move here, would you? And the answer is almost always yes.
I've had people in Richford who say the same thing.
Some people want to live in the sticks. I have a brother-in-law who loves deer hunting, and he works in Colchester and lives in beyond the far end of Enosburg. Now, I don't think he's going to.
Well, let's keep that.
I know, but I'm just saying.
I know you lived in.
Yeah.
That I agree with the idea that building housing around work is a very important thing. I don't think that's going to just detach from people who are driving from afar. I think that both is going to happen and continue to happen unless we have other ways for people to transport themselves.
Yes, Peter.
May I respond to that comment?
Yes, you may.
I don't disagree with you, but I mean, this is Vermont. A lot of people live here who have come here for that Vermont small town rural experience. But I think what we need to worry about and take very seriously are, again, the businesses and industries that are growing in South Burlington and Chittenden County as a region, and the fact that we are not providing affordable or housing that is affordable proximate to those workplaces, driving those workers farther and farther afield. They drive, what's the term? They drive to what they can afford or whatever. And then what is it? How does that help us with greenhouse gas emissions and quality of life, basically? Road congestion, VMT goes up, greenhouse gas emissions go up. We don't take transit seriously in this state, and Lord knows I and Joe and others have worked on that for decades, trying to get transit taken seriously here. Somebody said transit follows density. In my opinion, in my experience working in metro areas around the world, we can have transit and density together, following each other. You plan with transit in mind, not just build the density and hope. That's not a good strategy.
Thanks. Just a quick editorial comment. Even in the hinterland, housing is no longer cheap.
Yes,
it's expensive everywhere now. But Paul, did you want to?
Yeah, one of the questions that our planning commission has sort of asked us to sort of get some feedback that relates to all of this is the question of, as we think about how we meet all of our housing needs, and there's various different aspects of it, and we have such a great cross-section of our whole community here tonight, geographically. What are people's thoughts on the ability to bring more housing into built areas. So infill in our existing neighborhoods as one of the tools in the toolbox, helping those neighborhoods to thrive, but also understanding that that brings with it potentially change in neighborhoods that, and I'm often thinking of sort of our single family home, quarter acre lot neighborhoods. And, you know, what are some folks' thoughts on that subject as, you know, what does that mean in South Burlington? What is it? What do you think about it?
I'll dive right in. So I live on Proctor Ave, about 3 blocks in from Shelburne Road. And I'm a planner by trade, and I, you know, support the concept of the transit overlay district. And I think if things are done on good faith, and I see, okay, we're being asked to take all this density, increased density, and then just change the zoning bylaws to increase on the TDRs. Infill is fine and promoting that, but you've also got to make equal investments. And so I'll give some examples of, like, we're zoned to take all this growth, but we have no community center in our neighborhood or the whole stretch of Shelburne Road. Lots of brand new 70-unit apartment buildings have been built, quite a bit. Little frustrating, the city center that was planned is over off of Dorset with no bus service. So that's serving anybody as all of us get older. And then third, just as examples of just city priorities, the city moved hell and high water to get a Tesla dealership in when that space sat empty and did nothing. And I've watched for 3 or 4 years waiting for tiny ass feral dog park to get improved. So when I see city priorities being reflective of the majority of the residents, then I'll be like, okay, I can support infill development.
Okay. How do other people feel about that? Yes.
Residential side, it'd be nice not to feel like we're all being shoved in one spot of the city. It'd be nice to see other parts of the city be involved with more neighborhoods rather than just being shoved on one plot.
Thanks. Yes.
It's really scary. One of the graphs that Paul brought up earlier, it showed 8% of the city land available for building on and 51% not. That won't work. It goes back to things that a lot of other people have said about fairness for everyone, that we're creating a very exclusive area in the city and in the state. And those just aren't going to keep going. You can't make an area that is for lower income people and over here is everybody else. That doesn't work. If you can do mixed income, I'd love to see, I don't know building needs, but there are some beautiful big areas in the SEQ that are not swamps, not waterways, that I bet you could put a 12, 15-story building on with businesses in the bottom. You could have park area outside of it. You can make sure that you have a mix of affordability throughout the building. And that would help with a lot of the problems that we're seeing.
Yeah, Larry, right?
Right. So that percentage, that we should break that down between what the municipality owns of that open space, which holes, parks, and what's the developable part. And I'm not sure, Paul, you have that, but 61% might be a little misleading.
The 51% that is not available. Like what does that consist of?
That includes everything from land that is permanently conserved by, say, the Vermont Land Trust, to city parks, to floodplains, to areas that have been zoned like habitat blocks or river corridors. So it's all the areas whereby, or association land, I should say, that's the other one. Like land that a homeowners association owns and is set aside.
So it's not all buildable, put it that way.
No, I agree with that. It's, you know, there's the river banks, there's the schoolyard and stuff, but there is a lot of land that has been taken out of use. I think the TDRs, the transfer development rights, where someone who owns a chunk of land and doesn't plan to build on it, so they sell the right of how many houses they could build there to somebody in another section of the city to get denser housing. That's really weird. That's just paying somebody for what they're doing anyway. It would make a lot more sense if the city rules and regulations made the density that they want and not make someone buy a density from someone who doesn't plan to use it anyway. That's just one of the rule regulations that I would love to see change.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Helen, right?
It's Megan.
Me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just to get back to your question about infill, first of all, I love that I can go to open space not too far, and I sometimes have to take a car, but it's much closer to go down to the southeast quadrant than to go into the mountains for my family. So I'm glad to have those natural resource lands available to the whole city. Lots of trails on them, and increasingly so. What I would say for infill is it would have to be done in a way, I think, where it would be very mindful of the topography and the geography. And I've said this in the meeting before too, there are areas in the city that are very wet. So we have to think about impervious surface and how much should not be impervious surface. So you're going to really, for the existing homes, you might really create some issues like flooding basements, wet basements. But I think that with regard to infill, it's going to take that careful discussion. And just like I live on a fifth of an acre lot, because I can get to where I need to go very easily, but I still have a backyard. I think that's a value that a lot of people in my neighborhood have, that I think some people would like to have, and we should be able to give it to them. So we have to think very carefully about where that infill should happen and about the well-being. We have to think about making it a really thoughtful discussion so that it just doesn't pop up in somebody's backyard all of a sudden. So I know this whole NIMBY thing is really negative, but we're talking about people's quality of life, and we're talking about equity and fairness, and that involves public input, that involves a democratic process. So that has to involve dialogue and discussion. So I think that we have to look, at the climate resiliency as something that would galvanize this community. And I think that that's something that would move people to accepting that infill and that increased density, including in their backyard. But it has to be done in a way that is very mindful of what we can preserve for those people at the same time.
Thank you. So there's, yes, Ryan. I'm sorry, Tom, did you? Hey, Ryan, let me get, Barb, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to speak a little bit longer, but I think Megan said what I might have said far more eloquently. I think a critical word here is caution and planning and balance. I do have to disagree with Linda about a 10-story building. I can live with 4, but I don't think I can live with 10. And so
very attractive, Barb.
But I'm not even sure you can do 10 stories in Vermont. But regardless, I think the whole idea is one of balance and proceeding carefully. Now, not so carefully that in 10 years we're still having this discussion, but also not so quickly that we don't have a chance to think about both the climate and the housing needs and the need for some open space. I happen to live near where Megan does, and I walk to the southeast quadrant to be able to walk outside in some open space. So I hope we will keep some open space, but I also want to go back to what people said about, can we have some parks that are closer to where people live? The F-35 thing just boggles my mind about how it happened, but I'm not sure that it's not just South Burlington. It's going to take a larger voice than that. But I would encourage us to proceed with these conversations with the same kind of caution and concern that Megan expressed, and see if we can't find that middle place where everybody has to give a little bit and everybody wins.
That seems like a really good place to stop.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to say anything back?
Just thank you, everybody, for taking the time to attend. The next stage of what's happening here is that our city planner, Kelsey Peterson, and I, and all of the amazing department heads and committees are developing the first draft of sections, chapters, targets. We're going to be sharing those with the Planning Commission and with all the committees. So we'll make all of this information public in late spring, June-ish. We're expecting a full draft, and we would love to get lots of feedback on how all the pieces fit together, because I think one of the hardest things about a comprehensive plan is that no one topic can be looked at in isolation. They really have to be, as we've heard tonight, these things, housing and park space are both subject areas that are connected to one another, affordability and climate, transportation, et cetera. So thank you, everyone.
Same time tomorrow for the Southwest.
Same time tomorrow for the
Same place.
Southwest. Please join if you're able to.
You're earning your money, Joe. You're earning your money.
That's good.
Yeah.